The Association of Mineworkers and Construction Union blames government for the recent deaths and severe injuries caused by the explosion of a gas tanker in Ekurhuleni, just outside Johannesburg. The union thinks that the government must do more to ensure that hazardous materials are not transported through residential areas, and then, when it is unavoidable, such vehicles are escorted by law enforcement with proper precautions taken. Joseph Mathunjwa, AMCU President, joins me now from Ekurhuleni. Mr. Mathunjwa, thank you for your time this afternoon. This story and the absolutely devastating death toll and injury toll has gripped the country and traumatized the people of Plantation in Boksburg South. What do you want to raise in terms of the issues around the route, around the tanker, and around the gas that it contained?
Thank you, and good afternoon to your viewers and to yourself. And firstly, we'd like to pass our sincere condolences to the family who lost their loved ones. And we wish those who survived, who are still injured, still hospitalized, to have a speedy recovery. Yes, indeed, we believe that this accident could have been avoided if the bylaws was in force, if they are. Because the question will be, what was that truck doing in Boksburg among the community? Because if it was coming from Richards Bay, it should have via Pongola, N4, Rustenburg and to Botswana. Surely, if there were a permit granted, the route for gas truck could have been planned properly in order to make sure that the trip is safe. And secondly, the law enforcement and the fire brigade could have been called in before to evacuate the people where the truck will be passing, knowingly that it is carrying a very dangerous material, of which if any accident happened, the community or the people living along that part of the town would have been, could have been safe. So we see clearly that this has never been done. So hence we have encountered this. We are calling for the government that we know for sure before 1994 that during public holidays you wouldn't experience or see any trucks traveling because it was public holidays. People are closed at work, are traveling home. Some schools are closed. So they limit the trucks on the road. Hence, we've been calling for the bulk infrastructure of such material which are so hazardous and dangerous be transported by rails, not by road freight.
Mr. Mathunjwa, just hearing your response there, I was in Plantation in Boksburg South and spoke with several eyewitnesses and also bereaved families and survivors of those blasts on Saturday. A few told me independently that they saw the driver of that tanker allegedly moving some papers from the vehicle once it got stuck under that bridge into a pedestrian or a kind of regular car. You've mentioned the issue of permits and approved routes. What thoughts do you have on those reports that we've been hearing?
I think that will be subject to the inquest, of which we welcome very much the inquest that has been set by the government, of which all those witnesses whom they have seen such activity should be called in and put their statement forward. But the point that we like to emphasize is the points on bylaws enforcement. Because if you remember, I'll keep on referring prior 1994, every town, before you enter, you will see a traffic officer, waiting, in the entrance of every town. That was the reason, because they had to regulate to see whether the traffic or the trucks that are coming, or any vehicle for that matter, is not putting people's life in danger, is not carrying substance or is not a heavy-duty truck which could cause accident within the community in that particular town. So in these instances, it's very scarce to see such law enforcement in every town. Mm-hmm. These trucks are traveling amongst communities without being taken care of. Like, for instance, in the mining sector, where one has a huge experience, when we are conducting a blasting in the open cast, whether it is by any public road or communities, are evacuated in order to make sure that this blasting, when it takes place, no one is injured. And we stand on the road almost 2 hours to make sure that the road is clear, there will be no injuries. So hence we are saying the law enforcement must be there, and the strict permits should be regulated for any vehicle, commercial vehicle, who's transporting any goods. In this instance, the gases should not be on the road.
Yes, there you're referring to what we understand to be liquefied petroleum gas, a very hazardous material. And from what I've heard from eyewitnesses, after that tanker got stuck under the bridge, the gas started leaking out, making a hissing sound. You've highlighted the point of the residential area, the families in those homes around the site of that tanker. People in the general public simply don't know that something like that can spread and move as it did, and then prove so perilous. So your point on routes and on proper regulation and monitoring and policing speaks to that very issue. How do we deal with the issue of public information as well, as much as we need to curtail routes and make sure that these hazardous materials are not moving on residential roads wherever avoidable, but also to inform the public of the risks if it simply must be done?
I think the public meetings or community meetings where we've got councillors should be educational. Such information should be shared, communicated to the community, and also the visible signage and the visible boards that educate people about these hazardous trucks or hazardous gases that are transported by trucks. So that's another way. In the media, as I'm speaking to you, it could be something that you've got an advert. All these companies that are transporting such hazardous or dangerous material should be paying some slots in the media in order to make people aware of the danger of such. But we still believe that if the bylaws and the route was properly planned in advance, wouldn't be speaking about 18 people who lost their loved ones. This could have been avoided. And especially, we are living in the world where the technology has advanced drastically. So the government should regulate and enforce these collision avoidance systems in all these trucks. Like some of the cars today, you can hardly bump a car because it can automatically apply the brake itself if it senses that there is danger. If in these trucks there can be a regulation that every truck must have this stopping collision avoidance system, this truck could have never been under that bridge if then the failure of a human in terms of escorting was not available. But the truck itself could have applied the brakes and it couldn't. And the size of the truck itself, it should be having in the dashboard the screen where it will alert the driver to measure the size of the truck and the bridge itself, of which automatically can apply the brakes, and then this could have been avoided. So we call upon the government to make sure that all these multinational companies or any company that is transporting any good, it must be regulated that they must have this device.
Joseph Mathunjwa, just finally, in brief, if you can, Integrated Staffing Solutions, the company whose driver has now been arrested, we understand it, after receiving treatment for injuries. A 32-year-old, ISS saying that he was properly trained, he'd received medical clearance, he'd gone through the relevant courses in order to move that LPG. Your thoughts on ISS? They've given an initial statement, but not much word from them since they are conducting a forensic investigation.
Yeah, I think we must applaud the government as they've called this inquest. The question also will be, was he a competent driver? When did he left Richards Bay? Did he have a reliever? And secondly, did they have what they call it public liability insurance? So it's easy to say the driver was trained, only to find the driver maybe was tired of the fatigue, then he used the inroads in order to to avoid the fatigue. So all those kind of questions, those answers, they must come up clean, this company. Hence the company must be fully liable for this for this accident, and also with the government, because if the government was really up to their task, this accident could have been avoided.
Joseph Mathunjwa there, AMCU President, thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Of course, those 18 fatalities we've had confirmed, and several injuries, including 37 people, we understood, receiving treatment for severe injuries. Bear in mind, that includes children from Plantation in Boksburg South.